In a world where money and power often decide who wins and who loses, there lived a billionaire who was known far and wide for his wealth, arrogance, and love for showing off his skills. He had everything that most people could only dream of: skyscrapers, luxury cars, private jets, and an army of staff to serve his every need. But among all his possessions and achievements, there was one thing he loved the most: chess. For him, chess was not just a game, it was a way to prove his intelligence and superiority. He believed that no one, absolutely no one, could beat him. Every match he played ended in his victory, and this made him even more confident, almost to the point of arrogance. One day, in a grand hall filled with reporters and social media cameras, the billionaire made an announcement that shook the world of chess lovers. He declared, with his deep, confident laugh, that he would give $100 million to anyone who could defeat him in a chess match. The room went silent for a moment, then erupted into laughter. People couldn't believe their ears. Who could possibly beat this man? The challenge seemed impossible. Everyone assumed it was just another publicity stunt, a way for the billionaire to show off and increase his fame. Newspapers, television channels, and social media platforms buzzed with excitement. People from all walks of life debated about whether anyone had the courage, intelligence, or skill to accept such a bold challenge. At the same time, the billionaire's ego grew even larger. He imagined himself sitting across countless challengers, winning easily, and adding another trophy to his already massive collection of victories. He smiled to himself, thinking how this would further cement his reputation as a genius. In his mind, the $100 million was just a joke. He was confident no one would ever claim it. Every detail of the match, from the luxurious hall to the high-quality chessboards, was planned to intimidate anyone who dared to participate. The whole atmosphere screamed power, wealth, and unshakable confidence. But while the world laughed at the billionaire's arrogance, there were whispers among ordinary people, stories of a young girl from a poor neighborhood who had an unusual talent for chess. She had learned the game by watching old videos, playing with neighbors, and practicing on a small, worn-out chessboard at home. No one had taken her seriously before, not even her family, because they were busy trying to survive daily struggles. But her skill was real, and her mind worked in ways that were beyond ordinary. She could think several moves ahead, predict her opponent's strategy, and remain calm even under pressure. Unlike the billionaire, she didn't play for fame or money. She played for love of the game and the challenge itself. When she heard about the billionaire's announcement, something inside her stirred. The idea of defeating someone so powerful and arrogant seemed impossible, yet thrilling. She wasn't thinking about the money at first, she was thinking about the opportunity to test herself against the best. Most people around her laughed when she said she wanted to try. They told her it was a joke, that the billionaire would never lose, and that it was foolish to even consider such a challenge. But she didn't listen. Deep inside, she felt confident in her abilities, and the spark of courage in her heart refused to let her ignore the chance. The world, meanwhile, continued to watch. Some people were genuinely curious, some were skeptical, and others thought it would be entertaining to see the billionaire boast and laugh, only for no one to succeed. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire offers $100 million for chess victory." Who can beat the billionaire? Impossible challenge rocks the chess world. Every news outlet and social media page shared the story. Videos, memes, and discussions went viral, making the challenge one of the most talked about topics of the year. Everyone wanted to see if someone could actually do the unthinkable. In this moment, the stage was set for a story unlike any other. The billionaire's arrogance, his overconfidence, and his wealth created an almost unbeatable aura around him. The poor daughter, unknown to the world and underestimated by everyone, represented the quiet strength, intelligence, and courage of ordinary people who rise against impossible odds. This was not just a challenge, it was a clash between wealth and talent, arrogance and humility, confidence and genuine skill. And so, the challenge began, drawing the attention of millions, setting the scene for an unforgettable story of strategy, courage, and the surprising twists that life can bring. Little did anyone know that this so-called impossible challenge would soon turn into a lesson the billionaire would never forget, proving that true skill and determination are far more powerful than money or arrogance. While the world laughed at the billionaire's challenge, in a quiet, humble neighborhood, a young girl lived a life far removed from fame, wealth, and attention. She came from a family that struggled to make ends meet, where every day was a challenge to put food on the table and ensure her younger siblings went to school. Life had taught her patience, resilience, and cleverness, skills that she had applied not just to survival, but also to the game she loved most, chess. The girl had discovered chess in an old, tattered book she found in a small corner of her local library. At first, the pieces seemed confusing, the moves complicated, and the strategies impossible to master. But she was curious, and more than that, she loved challenges. Slowly, she began practicing. She created her own chessboard with scraps of cardboard and stones, and she studied each piece, imagining how it would move and interact. She played countless games against herself, imagining opponents and testing her own ideas. Unlike many others, she didn't rely on books or tutors, she learned by observing, experimenting, and thinking many steps ahead. News of the billionaire's $100 million challenge reached her through a radio broadcast one morning. At first, she laughed softly to herself. How could anyone beat a man so powerful, so confident, and so skilled? Everyone in her neighborhood laughed too. People said she was dreaming, that it was foolish to even consider competing. But something in the challenge sparked a fire within her, a mix of excitement, curiosity, and a quiet determination. This wasn't about money at first, it was about testing herself, about seeing if her skills could really match the so-called greatest player in the world. For days, she thought about the challenge. She studied every move she had ever played, recalling victories and mistakes. She imagined herself sitting across the billionaire in a grand hall, surrounded by flashing cameras and a sea of spectators. She pictured his confident smirk, his arrogance shining through, and she imagined her own calm, focused self, ready to take him on. The more she imagined it, the more real it became. She began visualizing strategies, plotting moves in her mind, and noticing patterns that others overlooked. When she finally told her family about her intention to take on the challenge, there was a mix of shock and worry. Her mother gasped, telling her that it was impossible, that the billionaire would never lose, and that people might laugh at her. Her father shook his head, worried about the public attention and the pressure. Even her younger siblings looked at her with a mixture of admiration and doubt. But the girl's resolve did not waver. She understood that this challenge was bigger than fear. She was not going to compete for applause or approval, she was competing for herself, for the chance to prove that skill, patience, and intelligence mattered more than wealth or reputation. Word of the unexpected contestant spread quickly. Journalists, who had been covering the billionaire's challenge as a spectacle, suddenly realized that someone from a small, struggling neighborhood had stepped forward. The idea of a young, unknown girl challenging the richest man in the world created waves of curiosity. Social media exploded with comments, speculations, and debates. Can she really do it? Some asked. This will be entertaining, others laughed, imagining a humiliating defeat. But beneath the jokes, there was a sense of intrigue. People loved underdog stories, and here was a real one unfolding before their eyes. The girl began preparing, not just mentally, but emotionally. She knew the world would underestimate her. She knew the cameras would zoom in on every move, and that the billionaire would try to intimidate her with his wealth, his confidence, and his theatrics. But she had learned patience from life, and she had learned strategy from chess. She practiced every day, visualizing not only the game but the challenges she would face from the audience, the media, and her opponent. Every day, her determination grew stronger, and her focus sharper. On the day she decided to officially accept the challenge, she walked into a small town office to submit her entry. The officials laughed at first, not used to seeing someone so young and so poor come forward. But when they saw the determination in her eyes, they realized this girl was serious. She had stepped out of anonymity into a world of wealth, power, and expectation, carrying nothing but her skill, her courage, and her quiet confidence. In that moment, she became more than a contestant, she became a symbol of hope, an unexpected force capable of challenging arrogance, and a reminder that true talent often comes from the most unlikely places. And so, the stage was quietly set for a confrontation that no one would forget, the humble girl from a poor neighborhood versus the billionaire who thought he was untouchable. What started as a laughable challenge was about to turn into an extraordinary story of courage, intelligence, and the unthinkable possibility that the underdog could win. The news of the young girl accepting the billionaire's challenge sent shockwaves through the world. The media went into overdrive, covering every detail of what had quickly become the most anticipated chess match in history. For the billionaire, the announcement was both amusing and irritating. He had expected a parade of wealthy, experienced challengers, maybe a professional chess champion, but a poor, unknown girl. That was not part of his plan. He smirked at the thought, convinced that her confidence was nothing more than naive bravery, destined to crumble as soon as the game began. Meanwhile, the young girl prepared herself in quiet determination. She had never experienced a life of luxury, so the grandeur of the match, the golden chessboard, the towering hall, the polished floors, was entirely new to her. She observed it all with calm curiosity, seeing the details that others might overlook. Every glimmer of the chandeliers, every shuffle of papers by the organizers, even the faint hum of cameras overhead, all became part of her mental map of the environment. She knew that winning this match would require not just skill, but focus, poise, and the ability to stay calm in the face of intimidation. The hall was a palace of opulence. Journalists and cameramen jockeyed for the best positions, their lenses trained on the players. A long red carpet led to a grand chess table at the center of the room, surrounded by velvet ropes and golden stanchions. The billionaire arrived in a tailored suit that glimmered under the lights, his entourage walking behind him, exuding wealth, power, and confidence. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing every step, every smirk, every gesture. Spectators whispered about the audacity of a poor girl challenging such a powerful man, some doubting her abilities, while others secretly hoped for a miracle. The young girl entered quietly, carrying only a small bag with her personal chess notes, a worn notebook, and a look of quiet determination. Unlike the billionaire, she did not announce her arrival with fanfare or dramatic gestures. She simply walked to the table, nodded politely to the officials, and took her seat. The contrast between the two players could not have been more striking, the billionaire radiating arrogance and wealth, the girl radiating focus and quiet confidence. The cameras captured it all, the billionaire's confident smile, the girl's calm, steady gaze, the tension that hung thick in the air. Officials explained the rules, though both players were already well versed in the game. The audience buzzed with excitement, some whispering strategies, others simply marveling at the scene. The young girl observed the table carefully, checking the alignment of the pieces, ensuring the board was perfectly symmetrical. She had learned that in chess, every detail mattered. Even the smallest misalignment or distraction could create an opportunity, or a mistake. She breathed deeply, centering herself, preparing mentally for the challenge ahead. The billionaire, on the other hand, played for spectacle. He tapped his fingers on the table, laughed confidently, and glanced around the room as if to say, "Watch how easily I win this." He underestimated the girl entirely, assuming that her poverty and youth were signs of weakness, not realizing that the calm, focused exterior often hid the sharpest mind. The audience, too, felt the tension rise. Some were there for entertainment, expecting a quick, dramatic victory by the billionaire. Others sensed the possibility of something extraordinary, an underdog story that might rewrite expectations entirely. As the game was about to begin, photographers clicked one final time, and the silence of anticipation filled the room. The young girl looked directly at her opponent, and for a brief moment, she saw not just a billionaire, but a symbol of arrogance, overconfidence, and the false belief that money could buy victory. She did not flinch. She did not smile. She simply focused on the chessboard, on the pieces, and on the countless possibilities that lay ahead. Every move she had imagined, every strategy she had practiced, now existed in the moment of reality. The setup of the game was complete. The players sat across from each other, one representing wealth and arrogance, the other representing courage, intelligence, and the quiet power of an underdog. The stage was grand, the stakes unimaginable, and the tension almost unbearable. And while the world watched, the billionaire remained confident, not realizing that the quiet girl sitting before him was about to challenge everything he thought he knew about skill, strategy, and victory. The match was ready to begin, but already, in the way she observed, planned, and prepared, it was clear that the young girl's presence alone was already a statement. She had come not to entertain, not to be intimidated, but to win, and in doing so, she had set the scene for a story that no one would ever forget. The room was silent, heavy with anticipation. Every eye in the hall was fixed on the grand chessboard at the center. Cameras clicked and recorded, but even the hum of technology seemed to fade beneath the tension. Across the table, the billionaire leaned back in his chair, exuding confidence. He tapped his fingers on the polished surface, a slow, deliberate rhythm that seemed to mock anyone who doubted his skill. He had defeated countless challengers before, and in his mind, this game would be no different. The young girl, in stark contrast, sat quietly, her posture calm and controlled. She had no entourage, no flashy suit, no air of arrogance. Her eyes were fixed on the board, studying the arrangement of the pieces as though they were old friends. She understood that the first moves in chess often set the tone for the entire game. She breathed deeply, recalling every strategy she had practiced, every mistake she had analyzed, every imaginary game she had played alone in her small home. This was her moment, and she would treat it with the respect it deserved. The billionaire made the first move, aggressive and bold, pushing his pawn 2 spaces forward. A simple start for most, but it was meant to intimidate. His smile was wide, confident, as if saying silently, "I have already won." The crowd stirred, some whispering in admiration of his boldness, others laughing at the apparent ease of his opening. But the young girl's eyes were calm, her mind calculating. She did not react with fear or excitement. She simply responded with precision, countering his move in a way that surprised even the most seasoned spectators. As the opening moves progressed, it became clear that this was not going to be a simple game. The billionaire tried every tactic he knew, aggressive attacks, subtle traps, and psychological intimidation, but the girl anticipated him at every turn. Her movements were deliberate, careful, and clever. Each piece she moved was part of a plan that had been forming in her mind for years. The audience, initially entertained by the spectacle, began to notice the shift. Whispers spread, "She's good, really good." The billionaire's smile began to falter. He leaned forward, studying her every move, trying to detect hesitation or weakness. But there was none. Every move she made was confident and precise, leaving him momentarily speechless. For the first time in years, someone was matching his skill, countering his strategies, and forcing him to think harder than he ever had before. The game was no longer a performance, it was a battle of intellect, focus, and strategy. As the opening progressed, tension filled the room. The cameras zoomed in on the pieces, capturing every movement, every calculated risk. The spectators held their breath as pawns advanced, knights jumped, and bishops crossed the board with elegant precision. Each move revealed not only skill but also the mindset of the players. The billionaire relied on experience and reputation, expecting others to falter under pressure. The girl relied on calculation, patience, and the quiet confidence that came from years of practice in solitude. The difference in their approach became more apparent with each passing move. The billionaire's tactics were bold, meant to dominate and intimidate. The girl's tactics were subtle, strategic, and adaptive, turning each threat into an opportunity. Her eyes never wavered, her mind never panicked. She saw patterns in the chaos of the game that others could not, predicting threats, anticipating moves, and preparing her counterattacks with flawless timing. The audience felt the shift in energy. What had started as a spectacle, a contest of arrogance versus fantasy, was now becoming a story of strategy and skill. People leaned forward in their seats, unable to look away. Every move mattered. Every pause was electric. Even the billionaire, used to controlling the narrative and the room, felt a creeping unease. He realized, with a twinge of disbelief, that this young girl from a poor neighborhood was not just participating in his challenge, she was controlling it. By the time the first few moves had concluded, the tone of the game had changed entirely. The billionaire was no longer laughing or confident. The young girl, with her quiet intelligence and unwavering focus, had turned what should have been a simple display of dominance into a tense and uncertain battle. The opening moves had revealed something important. She was not just skilled, she was a formidable opponent, and the billionaire was about to face a challenge unlike any he had ever encountered. The match had begun as a spectacle, a game meant to showcase the billionaire's dominance. But now, the atmosphere in the grand hall had shifted. Whispers filled the air, cameras focused intently on every move, and even the audience's laughter had quieted. Something unexpected was happening. The young girl was not just holding her ground, she was pushing forward, making moves that seemed impossible for someone so young and inexperienced in the public eye. The billionaire's confidence, which had been unshakable at the start, began to waver. He leaned closer to the board, tapping his fingers nervously now instead of casually. His usual tactics, bold attacks, intimidation, and subtle traps, were failing. Every move he made was anticipated, countered, and turned against him. It was as if the girl could see the game not just 3 or 4 moves ahead, but many more, predicting his strategy with uncanny precision. His arrogance, once a shield, was now a trap, leaving him vulnerable in ways he had never experienced. The audience, initially entertained by the billionaire's showmanship, started noticing the change. Eyes widened as the girl cleverly maneuvered her pieces, positioning herself to gain control over the board. Pawns advanced with purpose, knights leapt into unexpected attacks, and bishops dominated the diagonals, creating threats that forced the billionaire to retreat, rethink, and, for the first time, hesitate. Gasps and murmurs spread through the hall as people realized that this was no ordinary game. The turning point came subtly but unmistakably. The billionaire had left his queen slightly exposed, confident that the girl would not notice. But she saw it immediately. With calm precision, she set a trap that forced him into a choice with no good outcome. The queen, his most powerful piece, was in danger. He paused, his hand hovering over a pawn, then another, searching desperately for a way out. Sweat formed at his temples, a rare and alarming sight. He had never felt such pressure, never experienced the anxiety of being outmaneuvered by someone he assumed was inexperienced. Inside, the young girl remained composed. She did not gloat, she did not frown, and she did not rush. Each move was part of a larger plan she had developed in her mind over countless hours of practice. She understood that this moment was critical, not just a battle over individual pieces, but a test of strategy, patience, and composure. Her eyes flicked between the board and her opponent, noticing the tiniest reactions, subtle hints of hesitation, and micro-expressions that revealed his inner thoughts. She adapted, stayed flexible, and used every detail to her advantage. The billionaire's frustration grew. He tried to regain control with aggressive moves, pushing his knights forward, sacrificing a pawn to create pressure, and attempting to outwit her. But each tactic was anticipated, each trap carefully countered. The young girl's quiet brilliance became more apparent with every turn. For the first time in his life, the billionaire was being outplayed, outsmarted, and forced into a defensive position against someone he had underestimated. The arrogance that had carried him for years was crumbling. The turning point was not just on the board, it was in the billionaire's mind. His confidence had been shattered, replaced by doubt, fear, and disbelief. How could this young, poor girl from a quiet neighborhood, someone he had dismissed without a second thought, have the skill, the patience, and the insight to corner him like this? He realized, slowly and painfully, that he had misjudged her entirely. Every moment of pride and arrogance now became a liability, a reminder that wealth and reputation could never substitute for genuine talent and intelligence. The audience felt the tension rise like electricity in the air. People leaned forward, some holding their breaths, as the young girl made a move that sealed the control of the board. The billionaire's eyes widened. He had been confident in his victory at the beginning, but now he was trapped, forced to defend, forced to think deeper than ever before. The hall, once filled with laughter, was now filled with suspense. The underdog had taken the lead, and the billionaire's empire of confidence was cracking. By the end of the turning point, the story had changed. What had started as a joke, a display of arrogance, had become a real battle of intellect, strategy, and courage. The young girl had proven that careful thought, patience, and determination could overcome experience, wealth, and pride. The billionaire, now shaken and cautious, understood that the game he thought would be easy had transformed into a challenge that tested not only his skill but his ego, his judgment, and his very belief in his own invincibility. The match had reached a critical stage. The young girl was no longer just a contestant, she was a force to be reckoned with. And the billionaire, once untouchable, was beginning to understand a lesson that would stay with him forever: never underestimate the quiet strength of someone with determination, focus, and brilliance, even if they come from the most unlikely place. By now, the atmosphere in the grand hall had become almost unbearable. The audience, who had initially come for entertainment, sat in stunned silence. Every eye was fixed on the chessboard at the center, where the billionaire and the young girl faced each other, locked in a battle of intellect, strategy, and nerves. The billionaire, once supremely confident, now fidgeted slightly in his chair, tapping his fingers nervously on the polished table. For the first time in his life, he was uncertain. The young girl, however, remained calm and composed. Her mind was a flurry of calculations and possibilities, each move leading seamlessly into the next. She had anticipated every trap he might try, every aggressive strategy he might employ. Her plan, built over countless hours of practice and observation, was now entering its final phase. She could sense the moment approaching, the moment where her preparation, patience, and cleverness would turn into victory. The billionaire, sensing the tension but unwilling to admit it publicly, tried to regain control. He moved his rook aggressively, attempting to create pressure and force a mistake. The audience watched his every motion, noting the change in his demeanor. His arrogance was no longer a shield, it was a target, and the young girl had found the weak spots in his confidence. She responded with precision, moving her bishop diagonally, cutting off his escape routes and limiting his options. The crowd began to murmur, whispers spreading like wildfire, "She's doing it, she's actually winning." The final moves were like a carefully choreographed dance. The young girl advanced her queen with boldness and strategy, creating multiple threats simultaneously. Each piece she moved was part of a larger trap, designed not just to gain advantage, but to force the billionaire into a corner from which there was no escape. He tried to anticipate her strategy, but she had already thought several moves ahead, predicting his every reaction with frightening accuracy. The tension in the hall was palpable. Every time the billionaire moved a piece, the girl paused for only a moment, analyzing the consequences before responding. It was clear that she was not just reacting, she was controlling the game. The audience leaned forward in their seats, some biting their nails, others whispering in awe. The narrative of the match had completely flipped. The billionaire, who had once seemed untouchable, was now defensive, cautious, and on edge. The young girl had turned his confidence into a liability, and every move he made only tightened the net around him. Finally, the pivotal moment arrived. The young girl executed a brilliant combination, moving her knight and bishop in perfect coordination, setting a trap so subtle and elegant that it left the billionaire with no safe moves. His queen was threatened, his king's escape routes blocked, and every potential counterattack carefully neutralized. For the first time, the billionaire looked genuinely worried, his hand hovering over the pieces as if searching for an invisible solution. But there was none. Every option led to the same inevitable conclusion. The audience held its collective breath as she moved her queen into position. The trap was complete, and the billionaire's defeat was unavoidable. The silence in the hall was broken only by the faint shuffle of feet and the soft click of cameras capturing history in the making. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the board in disbelief. His arrogance, pride, and confidence, which had carried him through countless victories, had been dismantled, piece by piece, by the strategic brilliance of someone he had underestimated. The young girl, calm as ever, finally allowed herself a small smile. She had executed her plan flawlessly, combining patience, intelligence, and courage. She had not rushed, she had not panicked, and she had not allowed the spectacle to distract her from her goal. In that moment, she had proven something far greater than her ability to win a game of chess. She had proven that determination, skill, and careful thought could overcome arrogance, wealth, and reputation. The final moves were more than just the conclusion of a chess match, they were the culmination of a story that had captivated the world. The billionaire had been defeated, not by luck or chance, but by strategy, focus, and brilliance. The young girl's victory was complete, and the hall erupted in applause, not just for her win, but for the power of intelligence and courage to triumph over arrogance. She had done the impossible, and the world had witnessed history. The grand hall, once filled with confidence, laughter, and whispers of inevitability, had fallen into stunned silence. The billionaire, who had entered the room radiating arrogance and self-assuredness, now sat frozen in disbelief. His hand hovered over the remaining pieces on the chessboard, but no move could save him. The young girl, calm and focused, had outmaneuvered him at every turn. Every piece he had hoped would secure his victory had been neutralized, trapped, or forced into retreat. The impossible had happened, he had been defeated. For a moment, the billionaire refused to believe it. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head, as if the board before him was a mirage. How could this be? A poor girl, unknown and underestimated, had bested him in the very game he had thought was his domain. His mind raced, trying to find some flaw, some hidden advantage he had missed, but there was none. The young girl's strategy was flawless, precise, and brilliant. The victory was complete, undeniable, and irreversible. The spectators, who had been holding their breath, finally erupted into applause and cheers. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing the moment that had shocked the world. Journalists scrambled to record every reaction, every subtle expression, as history unfolded before their eyes. The billionaire's defeat was more than a game, it was a spectacle, a story, a lesson in humility, and the rise of an underdog who had defied every expectation. The young girl allowed herself a quiet, satisfied smile. She had not only won the game, but she had also demonstrated the power of patience, focus, and intelligence over arrogance, wealth, and reputation. She did not gloat or mock. Instead, she remained composed, understanding that true victory lay not just in defeating her opponent, but in proving that skill and determination could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. The billionaire, meanwhile, felt a whirlwind of emotions. Pride, shock, disbelief, and humiliation collided within him. He had underestimated her at every step, assuming that confidence and wealth alone would guarantee his victory. He had not prepared for the brilliance, the foresight, and the composure of someone who had nothing to lose but everything to prove. His empire of confidence, built over decades of triumph, had crumbled in front of a roomful of witnesses, and the sting of defeat was sharp and undeniable. He lowered his hand slowly and stared at the board. The pieces, once symbols of his dominance, now represented his misjudgment. The queen he had relied upon so heavily, the pawns he had underestimated, the strategies he had assumed would overwhelm, each had contributed to his downfall. He realized, painfully, that wealth, arrogance, and experience could never replace intelligence, creativity, and courage. The young girl's victory was complete, and there was no denying it. In the aftermath of the final move, the audience could hardly contain their excitement. People stood, clapping and cheering, some with tears in their eyes, overwhelmed by the unexpected outcome. It was not just a victory in chess, it was a victory for the underdog, for resilience, for quiet determination, and for those who have ever been underestimated or overlooked. The young girl had become a symbol of hope and inspiration in an instant. The billionaire finally looked up at her, his expression a mixture of astonishment and reluctant respect. He extended his hand, a gesture that acknowledged her skill, her strategy, and the undeniable truth of her victory. The young girl shook it politely, her eyes calm, her demeanor gracious. In that moment, something shifted. Not only had the game been won, but a lesson had been imparted. Humility, respect, and recognition had replaced arrogance and disbelief. As the room continued to buzz with excitement, news outlets began broadcasting the story around the world. Social media exploded with reactions, memes, and messages praising the young girl's courage and brilliance. The narrative was clear: the billionaire had been defeated, not by luck, but by intellect, preparation, and determination. The story would be remembered as a testament to the power of underdogs and the truth that greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places. By the end of the day, the young girl had achieved what no one thought possible. She had not only won the game of chess but had also captured the hearts and imaginations of millions. The billionaire's defeat was more than a personal loss, it was a story of humility, respect, and the remarkable triumph of talent over arrogance. And as she left the grand hall, calm, composed, and victorious, the world knew it had witnessed history, a victory that would inspire generations to come. The hall that had been filled with tension, excitement, and disbelief was now alive with a different energy, one of awe, admiration, and inspiration. The young girl, once an unknown face from a quiet, struggling neighborhood, had not only defeated the billionaire but had also captured the hearts of everyone who had witnessed her brilliance. Cameras flashed endlessly, capturing the historic moment, while reporters scrambled to tell the story in every corner of the world. The match, which began as a spectacle of arrogance and confidence, had ended as a story of courage, intelligence, and the triumph of the human spirit. For the young girl, the victory was surreal. She had practiced endlessly, played countless imaginary games, and relied on her patience and focus. Yet, nothing could have prepared her for the overwhelming attention she now received. Social media exploded with praise, interviews, and viral videos of the match. People from all over the world celebrated her, calling her a genius, a prodigy, and a true symbol of hope. Parents told their children about her courage, teachers praised her intelligence, and ordinary people marveled at her ability to turn what seemed impossible into reality. The billionaire, on the other hand, was left to reflect on the magnitude of his defeat. His arrogance, once unshakable, had been dismantled piece by piece, move by move. He had underestimated the quiet power of determination and intelligence, and the lesson was humbling. For the first time, he understood that money, fame, and confidence could not guarantee success against skill, patience, and creativity. He remained in the hall long after the applause died down, watching the young girl with a mixture of respect, disbelief, and introspection. Though humiliated, he had gained a rare understanding of humility and the value of acknowledging true talent. The aftermath of the game extended far beyond the hall. Invitations poured in for the young girl, from chess clubs, schools, and organizations eager to meet the prodigy who had shocked the world. Sponsorships, scholarships, and mentorships offered her opportunities that she had never imagined. But she remained grounded, aware of her roots, and determined to continue honing her skills, not just for fame or money, but for the love of the game and the satisfaction of overcoming impossible odds. Her victory had opened doors, but it had also reminded the world of an important truth: talent, hard work, and courage can come from the most unlikely places. The story of the match quickly became a viral phenomenon. Headlines across the globe declared it as one of the greatest upsets in history. Social media was filled with memes, clips of her decisive moves, and admiration for her focus and composure. Teachers used the story as inspiration for students, motivational speakers highlighted it as an example of resilience and determination, and chess enthusiasts studied her strategies, amazed at her foresight and ingenuity. The young girl had become not only a champion but also a symbol of possibility, showing that even those without wealth, privilege, or recognition could achieve greatness. For the billionaire, the experience changed him in ways few would expect. While he had once relied on his reputation and wealth to dominate, he now had a renewed respect for skill, strategy, and humility. He began mentoring young chess players, recognizing the importance of talent over status. Though his ego had been bruised, the lesson he learned was invaluable: underestimate no one, for brilliance often appears where it is least expected. Meanwhile, the young girl returned to her neighborhood a hero. Children played chess in her honor, and neighbors celebrated her achievement as if it were their own. She had not only won $100 million but had also won respect, admiration, and a place in the hearts of millions. Yet, she remained humble, understanding that her victory was the result of years of dedication, focus, and courage. She had proven that true greatness comes not from arrogance or wealth, but from skill, patience, and belief in oneself. In the weeks and months that followed, the match became legendary. Chess clubs held reenactments of her moves, documentaries were made, and her story was shared in classrooms around the world. The young girl, once invisible to society, had become a symbol of inspiration for generations. The Billionaire, too, carried the story forward, telling it as a lesson in humility and respect for talent. What had started as a high-stakes challenge had transformed into a story that would be remembered forever, a story where the underdog triumphed, arrogance was humbled, and the world witnessed the power of determination and brilliance against all odds. In the end, the young girl's victory was more than a game of chess. It was a triumph of courage, intelligence, and perseverance. It was proof that no matter where someone comes from, no matter how unlikely it seems, greatness is possible. And as the world celebrated her brilliance, it became clear that this was not just the end of a match, it was the beginning of a legend.